Good afternoon and welcome to another Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master virtual sessions. I am your host today, Michael Cronodle, and we have a special treat for you. We have none other than the great educator, Tyler Wertman, and the topic is what I love about J.J. Johnson. Oh, I know our trombone players are so excited today, or whether you're a guitar player or trumpet, it doesn't matter. We know that name, J.J. Johnson, and we know this is going to be some awesome content and information that Tyler's going to share with us. And I just want to remind you, if you're joining us live here, don't forget, if you have questions, just go into that chat feature there and enter your questions. We're going to leave some time at the end where we'll be able to answer those. And we appreciate you being here. And, you know, this wouldn't be possible if we didn't have our sponsors. So please be sure to check out the studio archives of past video sessions at clearwaterjazz.com education and outreach section. That's brought to you by Blue Water Wealth Management at Stewart Partners and Duke Energy, as well as our Young Lions podcast available wherever you stream. And that's brought to you by our friends at Marine Max Clearwater. Just search Young Lions Jazz Master virtual sessions wherever you stream. You know what? We're going to jump right into this. I mean, you've probably heard some of Tyler's awesome sessions. I mean, just some of the ones in the past were basic trombone fundamentals. I mean, he talked about long tones, lip slurs, tongue and articulation, major scales, all those great things that we need to develop our fundamentals. He also talked about an approach to improvisation on trombone. I mean, of course, you know, we're playing jazz. We got to know how to improv, right? So learning to develop your own personal sound on the trombone. These were all great sessions. You know, you can go back and check them out. But today you're going to get a fresh one about J.J. Johnson. And before we start, just want to tell you a little bit about the professor if you don't know him. He's a jazz trombonist, and he's very special to us here at Clearwater Jazz Holiday, our outreach programs. He's out in the schools. He's teaching and bringing up these young jazz musicians. He's a composer. He's a performer and also a producer. He focuses on jazz and classical styles. He's performed with many groups across the country. I mean, he's on all kinds of stages. And you may have seen him here at the at University of Tampa, where he's presently teaching intro to jazz and so many other things. And he received his Bachelor's of Arts in Music from FSU and a Master's in Music in Jazz Studies from USF. Without any further delay, Tyler Wertman, the stage is all yours.
Mr. Cronodle, thank you so much. And like you said, today is going to be what I love about J.J. Johnson, a very significant trombonist, jazz musician, and some would say the trombone master. Okay, but that's debatable between trombonists, right? You have your opinion, and that's wonderful. But today we're going to be discussing some things that I have taken away from Jay's playing, and I want to discuss with you all. Okay, and so today, before we get started, we're going to talk about his biography really quick. And so he was born January 22nd, which is coming up in a few days, I think next week, actually, 1924. Okay, and so he received early training, not on the trombone. Okay, and this is actually very unique. He received training as a pianist. Okay, and then at age 14, began to pick up the slide trombone. Okay, and so this switch from piano to trombone is a great switch. Why? Because, well, piano has some great properties. Okay, properties that the trombone does not necessarily share. Okay, for instance, the piano is very accessible with all of its range. Okay, the trombone is not as accessible from the lowest possible note to the highest possible note. That takes extreme training to be able to play these things accurately. However, on the piano, it's a simple touch. And with this touch, right, we can hear pitch, okay, perfectly on the piano. With the trombone, there's an entire slide, so to speak, a giant tuning slide that is used to select our notes. Okay, so coming from piano onto trombone gives him great advantages. Okay, he's able to hear these chromatic notes where they're supposed to be, and then figure that out on his slide, and then work with his articulation to find the best possible way to get these notes to speak, just like technique on piano. Okay, so 14, he's picking up the trombone, he's practicing, and at this time, he's getting ready for high school. Okay, so he graduates high school in 1941, but instead of going to college or some conservatory, perhaps, to study further his his jazz studies, he then opts to turn professionally immediately out the gate. Okay, which means he is quite proficient in his playing and confident enough in his stylistic approaches, as well as arrangements at this time. He was already composing a little bit to make it out there right out of high school, which is very rare. Okay, maybe back then not as rare if guys were fully committed, but it shows you that he really had his mind set on what he wanted to do. And I think that's really important because when we talk about his playing, that is going to be a giant factor that comes in. His diction, okay, the intent in which he plays. We're going to discuss those things in a second. But okay, so he's still a teenager, but with a very unique style. He was getting a rep across the jazz board, right, across the whole country, as one of the finest trombonists around, as well as band leaders and composers. Okay, so it's growing. He's growing, not just on the trombone, but his name. And that name is going to take him to play with other musicians. Musicians, like it says here, with the likes of Charlie Parker, right? We all know Bird. Bird's great. We had a session on him earlier discussing bebop, right? Intervallic studies, all these pathways that he really navigates through. Well, J.J. Johnson was doing a lot of these same techniques. Okay, Dizzy Gillespie, his bebop language, his style. Those are some things that, well, J.J. has in his playing as well. Miles Davis, his musical approach, his lyricism. Well, Jay's ticking those boxes too. Okay, and among others, right, he had Clifford Brown in his groups, Nat Adderley. Okay, the list goes on and on. And those are just some trumpet players, right? Some trumpet players, some great trumpet players to have performing with you. And again, in the late 50s and 60s is when J.J. Johnson was performing with his groups, his quintets, but at the same time, composing. Okay, not just composing jazz, for his own records or jazz arrangements, but scores for movies. Okay, and so by broadening his horizon, so to speak, he was able to create a lot of film scores, and so this writing obviously branched his playing as well, and eventually leading him to a retirement, which is funny to say because a lot of jazz musicians never really consider themselves retired from a career standpoint, right? We're always still searching. But JJ was quoted, maybe this is late 97 or 88. And he has said that, once he retired, it just really felt good to be away from that beast, which is the trombone. And it is a monster to play accurately and to play well. So to speak, the fundamentals that it takes every single day to get the sound that JJ had in articulation, it's intense. Okay. And so this is something that required dedication, love, and craft. And Again, these are all things that JJ really had in his playing and that we're going to discuss. Okay, so what I love about JJ Johnson is the way that he uses air to always have pleasant diction on the trombone. And I believe this is great because a lot of players tend to maybe think of lines, think of notes, cool lines to play, right? But maybe their sound suffers a little bit if they're playing down in the lower register. Okay, and maybe if they're playing up in the upper register, it's a tad thin. This is something that JJ really approached well. He understood the trombone and how to get these lines, these phrases to speak. And again, lines and phrases, not notes and licks, so to speak. This is what was really useful in his studies for me, is how he was able to grow in his solo by use of previous phrases, how he's able to build, how he's able to get off of certain ideas, okay, as well as having the knowledge to play differently on the trombone, right? He's not only single tonguing all of his lines. JJ Johnson has a great, fantastic double tongue, fantastic triple tongue that he utilizes quite well in all of his solos, which is great and very pleasing to the ear, because you do not want to hear someone playing one style for 3 courses. You'll get bored essentially. And so what JJ does is he's able to practice, right, in his practice time, staccato articulations, legato articulations, accents, breath accents, lip slurs, and then bring all of these techniques, so to speak, into his solos. And by doing that, you're not really, well, let me rephrase that. If you're not doing that, if you're not playing what you're practicing, you're making it a lot harder for yourself when you are performing, because you do not know what you're playing, what it's going to sound like, what the end result is going to be. But if you're practicing what you're playing and vice versa, you have a great understanding, a great idea how to pull off some of these ideas, these isms that you or JJ really enjoyed to play. Okay, we talked about it earlier, phrase building. Okay, not just playing notes, playing cool licks. Okay, building your phrase, building it from the melody, building it from limited instrumentation. From our example that we're going to listen to, JJ is playing with only 2 musicians, which is a drum set musician and a bassist. Okay, and that's it. There's no piano, there's no guitar. And we're going to talk about the advantages, maybe disadvantages, of having a limited rhythm section to play with. Okay, and the last point here, with his sound, with JJ's sound, he has a great blend of bebop, soul, blues, and the accuracy of a virtuoso soloist. Okay, you pair all those things together on the trombone, and that is JJ's sound essentially. Now, with perfect combinations throughout. Okay, he's never really too much in, or he doesn't have all his hands in the bebop basket, and then maybe he might touch on blues. The way he builds his phrases, it seems like it's a perfect recipe every time. Okay, and so with these phrases here is what we're going to be focusing on for our playing example. Now, for this playing example, it is Like Someone in Love. Okay, now this is a great standard written by Jimmy Van Heusen. Okay, and so this recording that we are going to be listening to is from 1961 with Kenny Clark on drums, and Pierre Michelot on bass. Okay, so some things here to take note of is J.J. Johnson set himself, apart from many other trombonists of this time, by focusing on the great 7 to 3rd or 3rd to 7th harmonic movement found between chord changes. Okay, this is something taken from the bebop movement, maybe during his studies with Charlie Parker, in which his chord studies allowed him to see these pathways between chords. He's not viewing them necessarily as, one chord's mixed or dominant. That means he should play Mixolydian. One chord's Dorian, and vice versa. He's looking for these pathways between the chords so that he can make music. Okay, and so here it said JJ would also implement the use of scales, to show the way bebop is performed on the trombone. Because remember, we're not playing the saxophone. We're playing an instrument essentially, which is a giant tuning slide. And so unlike the saxophone, we cannot sort of play one key to re-articulate and have a chromatic note come out. We have to move our slide and articulate at the exact time, which is a bit more work. Okay, which is why a lot of these bebop ideas that you might hear Bird play, a lot of them are slurred. Okay, because he's using that air to fly through the saxophone, which is great. But when we have a trombone here, we have partials to deal with. Okay, and JJ is very fluid with his air in order to go through these partials, to ascend and to descend through the partials. And again, that's use of airspeed, fast airspeed to increase, wider airspeed to go down essentially. Okay, so again, some things that he would take away here or that I took away are his use of scales and thirds. Scales and thirds is something that I believe everyone who practices their major scales should be doing at some point. And this is just breaking up your scale in a different way, right? Going up to the third, down to the second, up to the fourth, down to the third, instead of going up diatonically. It's a great way to sort of hear intervallically the diatonic harmony as we're ascending and as we are descending, okay, as well as diminished chromatic scale patterns. Okay, and again, this is great because on trombone, we have a essentially giant tuning slide with 7 notes, or 7 positions rather. And like this slide, like a guitar, we are able to play maybe one line and move our position down 1 slide degree or 1 fret to have a chromatic interaction. Okay, you can go up to raise your line by 1/2 step. Okay, and again, it's using your instrument in a way here to aid your improvisation. This is great. This is what every instrumentalist should be doing, having some understanding of their own instrument. And when they join, it's all coming together. Okay, again, minor, major scales. These scale degrees, 1, right? Third, 5. And now with these, we're going to talk about his solo here. And again, don't be too taken, right, on everything that you see here. We're going to dissect this very slowly. Okay, and so at A, we have our melody. Okay, we're going to listen to this in just a second. I just kind of want to describe to you what you're seeing. At B is the start of our first chorus. As you see here, 2 measures before B, this is his solo break going into his first chorus. Okay, and I have some things highlighted. For instance, scale patterns, okay, solo breaks, where he tends to add harmony, sequences, okay, maybe where he performed certain scale patterns, for instance, and everything is sort of color coded for you to make it easier on the eyes. And I hope this helps you because it certainly helps me visualize. For instance, right, we have Charlie Parker licks here. If you look at 73, going into, well, enclosures, okay, bar line shifts where he's playing harmony earlier than intended. Okay, and so I've outlined all these things here, and we're going to take a quick listen to the melody and his solo, and then dissect again. So wonderful playing. I mean, absolutely soulful, right? In the groove the whole time. Here, let's bring us back. Right in the pocket, in the groove, just playing everything that needs to be played, nothing more. he's not just playing because he wants to, right? He's playing phrases the entire time, building music. And that's what it's about here. Hopefully, when you were following along, you could see some of these points that I was trying to bring out here. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some of these points here. Maybe you had some favorites, okay? And those are the areas that I really encourage for you guys to go and check out, okay? What was it about, this 2 bars, this 3 bars that really intrigued your ear? Okay, study this and add it to your music. If you are really, gravitated towards a certain phrase, a style, a way of playing, singing, okay, this is something that your ears pick up on first, and then your mind needs to interpret for your heart to be able to play this stuff. It has to go through those steps. There's no easy way to learn different approaches. Okay. And if you really want to study, these are some things to sort of take note. Okay. So let's talk about his style. Okay. So this is something that in my master's, we did in my jazz bebop class, essentially, where we had to look at certain things that artists were doing and compare throughout the semester. Okay, and here you see maybe some familiar topics in music, okay, such as a bebop scale, okay, a bebop lick, enclosures, okay, sequences, quotes. For instance, we have 3rd to 7th or 7th to 3rd resolutions, which we have a ton of here. Scalular patterns, okay? And so with all of these things, again, this is a bit like the next step besides the transcription. And this is really analyzing what a musician is doing. However, I believe it's more important to look at the solo in this way here. And so by looking at it on paper, measure by measure, with your chords on top, it really tells you harmonically what we're sort of dealing with here. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's look at the melody. Not too crazy, okay? Very, very simple melody, quarter notes, eighth notes. That's about it here. But what is it about? Well, it's like someone in love, right? So it's about very happy, positive feelings, this overjoyed emotion, right? You almost can't believe it. You're lighter than a feather, so to speak. And so these are some things Jay's implementing in his solo very well. Okay, so let's look at his solo break, for instance. Scale patterns, right? I love it. I absolutely love it, because what, as musicians, should we practice every time we pick up our instrument? Well, scales after warming up, essentially, right? Different degrees of scales, right? Different harmonies, different things to practice, but major scales here. And again, we're in the key of F major, right? Check this out. And so our scale basically starts on R6 and goes up to R3rd. Beautiful. What else is that? Well, that is a D Dorian, concert D Dorian scale from your 1st to your 5th scale degree. Okay, so he's outlining quite a bit of harmony here. And again, you could see this as just F major 6. He's starting on his 6, playing his scale up to the 3rd. However you choose to view this, it's wonderful, because it's not that complicated and there's so much music being had. And so we build our solo. Okay, now these first couple measures, he's taking it easy, right? We're building, so to speak, phrase building. And this is what I love about JJ. So from these simple phrases, we are sort of developing into more advanced harmony, into more advanced techniques. And look at these resolutions here. Okay, so we're going from D7 to G7, right? So we're outlining 1, 2, 3 of our G minor 7 chord here. Scales, essentially. We're still building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Okay, beautiful, beautiful scales to play and practice to give you different approaches to harmony. Okay, we have a cool third to flat 9 resolution here, and he lays back. That's another thing that J.J. Johnson does very well in his solo. Hopefully you heard that, is he tends to play, not just in one spot of the beat. There's a lot of musicians who they get used to maybe playing double time, right? Very fast, implemented time that's twice as fast of what's supposed to be played. And they might play ahead of the beat. Maybe you sing bluesy and you're singing kind of behind the beat to help you with those, vocalizations. Okay, maybe you sing right in the middle of the beat, and in each of those 3 ways you become so comfortable by doing that you don't venture out into those other pathways. Well, I encourage you guys to do so, to add that in your singing, in your playing. Okay, because JJ, he plays everything. He lays back on the trombone, he plays right on the time. He plays double time right up on that forward edge of the beat. And his time is absolutely perfect in every instance. Why? Because he practices in these ways. And it's very evident here as we keep on dissecting. Okay, and you're going to see a lot of 7 to 3 highlighted in this orange or red color. And that shows his harmony here. Okay, again, we're building, right? A7 right here. He's on top of that third from G, which is the third of E minor. Okay, 7 to 3 here on the last line of the first page on G7. Well, there's B natural, your third, and F natural, your 7th. Okay, and then we have chromatic enclosures. Those are great. And if we keep on analyzing, we have different scale patterns here. And again, scale patterns, right? Scales, something we should all be playing. Change running, okay, sort of outlining chords by arpeggios. And this is great because we see here, this arpeggiation, okay, with an enclosure, chromatic enclosure to D via the C sharp here, gives us a D natural, F natural, A, which is a D minor triad. Also B flat major 7. So he's outlining chords via arpeggios. Okay, again, he was a piano player, right? We just talked about that. And so he understands triads, 7th chords, voicings. And not only he understands these things, but he understands the clarity in which they're supposed to be played. And so coming from a pianist's perspective on the trombone, it allows him to outline harmony perfectly as you're seeing right here. Okay. He's not playing any extra notes, so to speak, right? You see a lot of rests. Look at these. I love it. Because what does that mean? He's taking time after his phrases to build the next phrase, to let the music sink in, to listen to his rhythm section, listen to what they're doing in order to propel that next chorus, right? To keep the music going, keep it building. And that's the number one thing we should be doing. I really dislike when I hear music and it's very stale. There's no motion. to it, or emotion, right? Those things aren't always hand in hand, but you need to have some sort of understanding of what you're going for. And I think that's really important. And so as we build throughout this first chorus, we see, let's see, the sequence lick here. I love this line. So this is basically just 4-3 on any major scale. And this is, I sort of call it the JJ lick. And so not only JJ, but Curtis Fuller, a whole bunch of guys. Let me see. A whole bunch of guys play this. So in another key. And it's a lot of fun because we're just going between our fourth and our third scale degree. And it's outlining major harmony because it's building tension and then resolving that tension, going to the fourth and resolving it down to the third. Okay, and this is what he's doing here. And this is what I consider a JJ lick, so to speak, a JJ-ism. And this is one of many. And so by listening to artists, recordings after recordings, albums after albums, you'll pick up on certain things that they might do in their music over and over again. That's important as a listener to realize what those things are. Again, do you like those things? What about it do you like? Can you take it and put it into your own playing? And this is going to be different for everyone. But I believe as an artist, we need to be influenced by the right things and by thinking of what those things are and interpreting them as such. It will really help us rather than wondering, what's our sound going to be like? What should we do to get this sound? It's more conceptual than that. Okay, so if we keep on looking through this solo quickly, we have Bird quotes, Charlie Parker quotes. And I just love this. He's showing bebop in his playing, showing this use of fun phrases, so to speak, in clear harmonic resolutions. Again, 7 to third, going down to the third of A7, right? Down to the third of D major 7, F sharp. He's nailing all of this harmony. Again, bar line shift, sort of playing a scale pattern in D minor, just a little early, 2 beats, getting him into D minor. And again, look at that scale. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5th scale degrees. Okay, so nothing revolutionary, but just scales placed perfectly. Okay, enclosures as well, and I love this. That is we see here. So we're in sort of G minor, going back to C7, G minor to C7. So in C7, that is sharp 9, flat 9, 1. Going into our third. Okay, so talk about harmony. He's nailing harmony just like Charlie Parker would, essentially, but he's on a completely different instrument here. This is the trombone. Okay, so you'll see some similar things here, some sequences. Okay, again, 3rd to 7th resolutions. Linear chromaticism. Okay, this is really cool. Linear chromaticism here, because he's sort of like I was talking about, using the trombone as a device rather than using it as an melodic tool. Okay, and so let's see, down here at 129, it's simply just chromatic enclosures. Okay. Okay, and so you can do this all over the trombone. And it gives you a really fun sound. Again, you're playing a lot of harmony, so it really doesn't matter what you're playing. It's the intent in which he's using it to connect his phrases. Okay, and so this is after his fours with his drummer. Okay, and so we are sort of trading time in which we can solo here. So JJ will take 4 measures, and then the drummer will take 4 measures. Okay, and so by building these lines together, we can see that he's essentially doing just that, building, growing to more advanced rhythms and more advanced harmony. And that's important too, because that's one thing I hear a lot of musicians do is they come out of the gate swinging to the fences, right? In the first line, the first chorus they play, it's every note under the sun that they have, rather than building up to that point. And I think JJ does this very well. He's able to control not only his passion, right, but his dynamics, and let the trombone sort of do the work for him, which is what we need to do, not fight the instrument. And again, bringing things back perfectly here into the last chorus, which is F. And look at his ending. Okay, I think that's something really important too. Kind of just playing some blues, right? Just laying on it until the end. And then 5, 6, major 7, and then ending it right there on a fermata. Really simple stuff, but a lot of attitude is being had. Okay. And that's important for a trombonist, is to have that approach, okay, of that understanding, to play what is needed and not anything really more, because that's just excess, right? It's the equivalent to having a paper and just having run-on sentences. You want everything to be very, very concise. Okay, and so here are some takeaways from that transcription. Well, J.J. Johnson utilizes his 7th to 3rd or 3rd to 7th melodic movement often in his solos. Okay, so what does this mean? That means his harmony and his knowledge of harmony is so proficient that he understands not only the leading tones going into each chord, but your common tones as well. Okay, he knows what notes are changing, what notes are staying the same, and what notes to outline to demonstrate that harmony. And that's really important because on that recording, there was only drums and bass. There was no piano, there was no guitar, no vibraphone, none of these instruments to sort of play and demonstrate chords. And so you might think that's, a disadvantage, because then he's not hearing, all of those harmonic pathways played by that individual. Well, it could be, or it could be an advantage, right? By having a more open sound with just the rhythm and your bass playing the outlined harmony of each chord. Well, that allows you to then play your own harmonic choices and not be confined by what X, Y, or Z musician is doing on top of those individuals. And it leads to this very open sound, which is sweet. I love it. And again, less individuals, which means the music speaks more. You're paying more attention to the individuals that are playing. Okay, so JJ uses harmonic generalization, okay, of tonic major key centers, which means he's not afraid to make music and build phrases in our tonic, key area, which is really important because when we're playing in our, F major, C major, whatever key that might be the root, we still need to make music. It can't just be what can I play in F major that will sound good, right? He's thinking of that melody. He's combining it with his phrases where he's at in his solo, so to speak, to make those decisions. Okay, we saw some bar line shifts in which he would move a 2-5, maybe just a little early to help with his idea in which he was going to build from in the following measures. J.J. Johnson also performs a great number of scalar patterns and change running elements. So we outlined and demonstrated a ton of basic scales, right? Just 1 to the 5th, 1 to the 6th, up to the 9. Okay, just all these different ways to play your scales in thirds. Okay, and again, by practicing those and then performing them, it gives you a great outlook on what it's going to sound like. If you're not practicing those things, but you want to perform them, you go out to the gig and you just try to do some of those things, it might not roll off. Okay, but why not play, some things that you've practiced that will roll off because you understand where it is going to go. And I'll take that route every single time. Okay, and so our last element here is his technique. Okay, so he displays his virtuosic technique by playing fast consecutive chromatic triplets at times through different partials, for instance. And by showing this clarity, it shows his use of air, right? He's playing the trombone, which is an wind instrument. In order to play different partials, it's not as simple as a piano where we can, right? We actually have to play air, buzz these pitches to get these things to happen. Again, we talked about the chromatic linear line. Okay, and then we also talked about his just use of the slide. You also heard. And so by playing these different partials, JJ is able to demonstrate his airspeed, right? And so he has a great sound. Throughout the middle of the register, as well as playing, wherever he chooses. It's because of his air control. And by having that knowledge of where to place your air, that leads to a great sound, great clarity, and great technique. Okay. So if you were to shape your sound or solo off of, these elements of J.J. Johnson, for this example here, these are some things maybe to take away or incorporate in your own playing. Okay, use of altered dominance. We talked about how on that C7 chord, he was playing sharp 9, flat 9, going into the root. Okay, this is great because this is altered harmony that are extensions above our thirds and sevenths. Okay, so different pathways to get into dominant chords. Why is this important? Well, because in jazz, we are going to have dominant to tonic resolutions almost in every single tune that we have. Okay, and so this 5-1 is going to be important. So we need to understand different pathways to play 5-1 and eventually different predominants that lead into different dominant chords into our tonic. For instance, 2, right? 2, 5, 1. You might have heard me say this in the example. This is diatonic harmony, leading from our minor 2 chord to our major dominant 5 chord into our major 1 chord. Okay, and there's so many different ways to do that progression. Okay, like I said, it's important to understand different ways. Okay, so again, focusing on strong 7th to 3rd resolutions, something that JJ implemented in his solo, which gave him very clear harmony. And that's something that we can all take away from that solo. Our ears were going with everything he was playing. Nothing that he did play seemed out of place. Why? Because he understood these strong markings. Okay, also enclosures, sequences, right? Using the trombone in different ways to create more sounds, more music. Okay, try incorporating bird quotes. Okay, by incorporating, different musicians, different styles, you are going to, have different elements added into your music. Okay. Harmonic generalizations of tonic key centers, again, being able to play and have different ideas in one key is really important. Scale patterns, right? We talked about the number one scale pattern we saw was 1 to 5. Okay, he played this at least 3 or 4 times in his solo, which means what? He practices his scales, right? And this is something that we all do as musicians. So why not have elements of this in our playing, right? It's a very recognizable figure. We all know what it's supposed to sound like. And why not then mess with maybe one interval, raise the 5th to a sharp 5, skip a note like we saw JJ do, play up to the 6th, then go up to the 9 for more color, so to speak. And this is what we're after. How can we make more music out of something that's very basic and build from those things? Okay, and again, his use of harmony, that 3rd to flat 9, very, very cool sound, and is something that maybe more advanced players can get their hands on. But if you're still struggling with upper extensions like flat 9, sharp 9, right now 3rds and 7ths is what we should be focusing on. Find those 3rds, find those 7ths of every chord, and realize, how do they move, right? Do they move up? Do they move down? Do they stay the same? And by understanding those tendencies, you then can start outlining harmony like anyone. Okay. And that's everything I had on JJ Johnson, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. This was an awesome session on JJ. I mean, you talked about the different techniques and everything that he uses. I like how you implemented about soloing, having a plan when you solo. And when I hear him play, I like how he started off and he made it a story, and of course we all know that he had so many skills and, all kinds of things in his bag, but he wrote a story with a solo. So I could truly appreciate that about JJ Johnson. And I love the history aspect and just how you wrapped everything all in one. And you know what? If you're listening with us today, if you're with us and you enjoy these sessions, guess what? You're in luck because there's more coming your way and it's free. Can you believe that you can get content like this? Great education on various artists and different instruments and things like that. and you can get it right here. Where? At clearwaterjazz.com/education. You know what? Maybe you have a topic that you want us to discuss, or maybe your favorite artist you want to know more about. Well, you can have one of these great educators and musicians talk about why they love them and just dig a little bit deeper. If you're that person, please email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com. We would love to hear from you. So until the next time we see you, first we want to thank you, Professor, for coming in, Tyler, and just giving us a great session. And we want to remind you, we'll see you next time. And until then, keep it swinging, everyone. I'm your guest host. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.